75% of Americans say it's becoming harder to distinguish human created content from AI generated content online, according to a 2025 survey of 2,000 US adults. And that's creating a new challenge for marketers. AI generated blog posts, social contents, emails, landing pages, and the entire content calendars in seconds. But creating content was never really the hard part. Standing out is. My name's Tyson Stockton, and joining me today is David J. Ebner, president and founder of Chatter, as well as Content Workshop. David has spent more than a decade helping enterprise brands tell their stories, including organizations like Palo Alto Networks, Myers-Briggs, Star Wars. He's also the creator of the content landfill philosophy that recently launched Chatter, an AI-powered platform designed to help marketers uncover relevant stories and audience signals. Today, we're going to be talking about why brand storytelling still drives results in an AI era. Welcome to the podcast, David.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tyson.
Now, I'm glad to have you on here and diving deeper into like content, but not just content, but like brand storytelling. And I feel like we're at an interesting time in content where it's like you have all these different opinions and claims of content's dead or like it's going to become too homogenous. But I love that like you're really leaning into like the storytelling aspect, because I feel like that's where a lot of the value kind of comes to life a bit more. So maybe like rather than kind of jumping right into barreling into the subject, I'd love it if you could just kind of tell the listeners a little bit of kind of like your path, because I think that plays into also like your perspective on content and the role that it plays.
Yeah, sure. My path has been very much ingrained in this concept that I believe deeply that like great storytelling is all about an emotional connection between the reader, the viewer, and the person who created the content. Same could be said about any piece of art, by the way. And that's kind of where my origin story started. I was a one of five kids in my family. I grew up in northern Ohio, working blue collar family. I remember the hardest thing to do was to get the attention of the adults because they were, running around and making dinner and, taking us to soccer practice or whatever it was. Right. And the way I did that was telling stories. I would tell these fantastic stories of what happened in my day. 90% of it would be completely false. And I would wait for some sort of emotional reaction from my mom, say. And, that was kind of like the way that we connected. That has, carried on forever. Been creating stories in my head for a long time. Finally got them out in paper, back in school. I studied creative writing, and then I didn't have enough of that, so I went back to school to get a master in fine arts in creative writing. So, I come to storytelling from like a classically trained background, but for the most part, for me, it's just always been how do we connect human to human, and storytelling is the way that's always been done and the way it's always going to be done.
I love that. And it also like reminded me of like the saying or slogan, kind of like, and I forget even where it's from, but like never let the truth get in the way of a good
A good
story.
story. Yeah, I love that.
From it kind of getting into. But I also like the coming from the creative background too, because I feel like there's been kind of this tension between technology and like the creative purist. And like I have a buddy who's amazing writer, and it's like, and he has this love hate with
Mhm,
technology. So like you seem to be fully leaning into it. Kind of like
mhm.
how do you make peace with that, with having that like kind of creative core?
That's such a great question. I don't know if I fully have made peace with it. For me, it's always come down to a good story is a good story. Does it really matter how it's created? Obviously, nobody should be hurt in the production of this story, right? Nobody has been harmed. But inevitably, good is still good, bad is still bad. That's the same it's always been. So when people say, AI content isn't good, well, there's always been bad content. Or this story is good, it's never been, doesn't matter who, where, how it was created. So that's kind of the place I come from is quality is quality. And quality will reign supreme in whatever the story is, whatever the fashion, whether it's an artistic form or a commercial form. I've met plenty of people who have had a hard time just getting over the bridge of like storytelling commercially. Like they're artistic storytellers, and like they can't put that creativity in a box um, for a a commercial client, right? And that's fine. It's a different endeavor, but it uses a lot of the same skills. So I really don't see them as two things. I think for me on one level, and probably your friend as well, it's kind of this concept that all of these things that we've been studying, this craft, this thing that we've been trying to become an expert in. And writing is very much a something you practice, not something you are like done at. You're never done writing. It's just like medicine or law, you practice it, right? Um, this thing that we spent so much time and energy perfecting and practicing, people are now saying that it's easy and cheap and it's not as valuable. I think it's more that that hurts a lot of creative people and writers and artists, rather than the idea that it's done with AI. People who are AI, honestly, if you understand how to use AI effectively and understand what it actually is, not the hoopla of what people talk about, but what it actually does, and you're an expert at anything, you combine those two things together and you really do have quite the combination for the future. And I think that's where, brand storytelling and content really lives, is if people are expert storytellers and know how these tools can be used effectively, they're going to be, the future marketing unicorns that, we've been talking about for years that don't exist. Like they might actually come to fruition here soon.
100%. And you've spent a lot of like your time kind of on like the enterprise level and like working on that. And it's a completely different arena where now like you not only have like the challenge of like creating good content, but there's like the challenge of scale.
Yeah.
And I think AI and like generative AI in particular has like lowered that like barrier to entry. And I
Hmm.
remember working on like content projects with some, large enterprise e-commerce sites like 10 years ago. And it's like you're dealing with like an army of
Yeah.
writers. And it's like, how do you manage, coordinate? And like that's the big challenge. But obviously now it's like you have so many different tools at your disposal to scale content. Why do you feel that like storytelling matters even more now to those enterprise teams when they're looking also at scaling production with
Hmm.
AI?
Yeah, everything comes down to differentiation, right? And again, going back to like understanding how these AI systems work, they're truly not. I'm going to get backlash for this somewhere, but they're not really intelligent. They're not really thinking. They're just computing, right? So it's numbers, it's math. Tokens are embedded with numbers, and it's like what embedded number comes after the next number, right? So a lot
Mhm.
of that is predictive, right? That you pull out your phone, and Apple has had this for probably since 2008 when the first iPhone. No, before that. Anyway, it's been around for a while. I think 2008 is when they came out with predictive texting for your text messages. It's not a whole lot different than that. Obviously, far more, far larger, and off of a larger database. But what we're trying to do is predict the next word to make the person who's using the terminal happy. That's what AI is doing. So if you do that, and enough brands lean too heavily into it, they don't differentiate because they all sound the same. And that's really the issue right now is AI content is bad because it doesn't say anything unique and it doesn't say anything helpful or different from somebody else. So it doesn't really matter the size of your brand. Inevitably, you need to be different. You need to have a differentiation. There has to be an answer as to how you're different than the other brand next door. And for enterprise brands, those have huge stakes. The large difference in a swing of a stock price that could, change people's lives that day, right? So they have more of an onus, I think, to the public to make sure that they don't get this wrong. And certainly their shareholders, all that good stuff too, and their employees, right? Like let's not forget about those people. So I think it's always mattered, but right now it matters even more because there's such a volley of just junk that's out there
Mhm.
that it's harder to stand out. It used to be easier to stand out because you had a lot of different voices in a room. To your point, large e-commerce brands would have all these writers. That meant even though there was one voice for the brand, there were all sorts of different like shades of that voice depending on who was creating it, right? And there were different angles and different, you could differentiate within a brand and still stay true to that brand identity and that brand story. Today, it's much harder when you have essentially one writer, which is some sort of system doing all of it, right? So it's just become more difficult.
And I feel like there's There's elements in that too, like for us as like SEOs
Mhm.
that I mean, whether you're SEO actually or just more of like a content purist, to me that's like AI is also has this potential risk, as you're saying, of like homogenizing the
Yeah,
content. And it's like all these systems are doing is, they're not creating anything net new.
right.
They're not coming with a new perspective or that it's aggregation of existing things. So it's like, to me, the table stakes of just having content is raised. But
Yeah.
then if you run through that thought experiment of like, well, what happens then if everyone has like the same type of content or the same quality of content? How does one differentiate? And so I think what you're mentioning, whether it's, in the form of like the storytelling or
Mhm.
firsthand experiences, it's like that net new contribution, I feel like is and hopefully going to be more and more of the difference maker
Mhm.
in these things because yeah, if everyone's using these tools in these systems, how do you set yourself apart?
Yeah, I mean, that's really the big question, and I hope that we come around the corner on this because I feel like a lot of brands have kinda leaned heavily into it, certainly from an efficiency and like executive pressure point of view of using these tools. And they have not yet seen the downside of what the decisions that they've made, especially the people who have kind of like gotten rid of their content part, their departments, their creative thinkers who are internal. Creativity will always have to live in the process somewhere, right? And people have different ways of getting to that. They have a different process where they like to brainstorm and ideate with AI, or they like AI to do the drafting and they approve and actually get the outline together. They do more of the planning on the front end, or they want to be in the QA in the back end. There's all sorts of different places where human creativity should live in that process. It's still a process. So just
Mhm.
decide where those points are that have the greatest impact, so that you can differentiate, so that you can stand out, so that the quality meets your expectations. I think that's the big difference. That where we get lost is where we think that it's like a magic button. It's like you just hit the button and it's done. That's not how this works. It's still somebody, it's a tool. So it's still somebody sitting there wielding that tool, however you position it. So keeping human creativity in the process is going to help you do all of that. But to your point, it's kind of a weird spot because what we used to say is there used to be somewhat of a similar distance between like what is bad versus what is passable versus what is good, right? There's some space in between those different metrics or benchmarks. Now, bad and passable has shrunk. Like you can get something passable out the door right away. But the second you start to spend a little bit more time with that passable piece, that magic button content from AI, you start to realize it doesn't actually say anything or help my target audience. And then that distance from passable to good just gets further and further away, especially if you started to eliminate all the resources you had available in which to do that. So, it's maybe a bit of a cautionary tale. Plan for the next 6 months, 12 months, not just the next three, when it comes down to these efficiency systems, and just deploy creativity as a step in the process, if not multiple steps, and figure out how that works for you as a brand.
I love that you actually call out that it can be in different places because I feel like you hear a lot of people talking about like the human in the loop.
Mhm.
And I feel like, people tend to gravitate to like, oh, that means like approval or
Yeah.
QA.
Yep.
But you're calling out that it's like you can actually bring that in at different points, and then it's almost leaning into the human piece of like, well, my style may be this way and this works better for it, or it could be like the content leading where that
Mhm.
is. But I feel like that's a really important piece that it's like there is no one solution of like where the human in the loop actually needs to be.
Yeah, and that's how I see human in the loop also, Tyson, is it's a gate, right? Like human in the loop is a gate. It's an approval gate, it's maybe a QA gate, but the creativity element is more of like, think of every step in a process as an agent, right? Like maybe it's a autonomous agent, maybe it's AI, maybe it's something else, but like humans can be those agents too. So this step in the process may be better if a human does it. Or maybe if it's you deciding, just choose the stuff you like to do the most, right? Like why would you take away the things you enjoy in your day? AI is not supposed to, it's supposed to give you more time to do the things you enjoy, not eliminating them from your life, right? So if you like to
Yeah.
draft and write, then do that. You're going to have better results. Um,
Mhm.
if there are there pieces in the process that can be automated, and primarily I'll say, Tyson, a lot of this is automation, not actual like AI. We're kind of conflating those two terms about like step workflows versus like actual thinking or computing happening. But look at the process, look at your SOP. If you don't have an SOP for creating a great piece of content, don't start with AI. Like start building the SOP. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. How do we create good? Know what good looks like, and then start to look at it and say, what do I enjoy doing versus what can be automated or handed off? And then,
Mhm.
build your gates, build your human in the loop however you want from that point. That's at least that's my philosophy.
Well, and I want to come back to also like the
Mhm.
storytelling kind of specifically. Like how do you articulate like the value or like why it matters so much to a brand? Like are we speaking more of like being persuasive or like trust building things? Like what how do you articulate like why that matters so much?
Yeah, I think it really does allow brands to differentiate more when they really understand their brand story. And I'll take a step even further back and kind of define what I call brand story. And feel free to disagree with me in the comments or wherever you want. Right, I'm open to other ideas, but I believe a brand story is not the story of how a company was founded. The origin story. That's not the brand story. The story is not about the founder. It's not about the features of the tool. The brand story is all about how you help your target audience, period. How do you make people's lives better by them consuming or engaging with your brand? That's your brand story. They're the hero of the story, not you, right? So focus on them first. And if you can figure that out, you do some persona work, right? You do a little bit of message mapping. You look at pain points versus like the solutions you provide. Start thinking of what you provide as solutions and not products as much as possible, but like solve pain points. And
Mhm.
what's the argument for that? Like, how do you solve that? How are their lives better? What are they going to feel now? If you start to like put that together in like a full package brand identity, you think of that as like your cloud, right? It's a cloud that's floating around. Here, I'm in Florida. It's the summertime. We get afternoon rains all the time, right? So like all of that, all of the information is in the cloud. And at some point in
Mhm.
time, it starts to rain. Like every drop is a piece of content. Every drop is something your brand does. It all still comes from the same source, which is we help these people this way, and it makes their lives better this way. And if you can like go back to that to bring through, then you're gonna create things that are different. Even if they're the same as your neighbor, at least they're tied to an emotional connection, if nothing else. And that is enough. That is enough to get brand loyalty, to get trust, and it's enough to get customers. So start there and then let things flow from there. Everything else really is tactics. The true strategy is like, who do we help? How do we help them? The tactics are how do we deploy that and how do we get people to see that we do this? So you can go into my rate of tactics, and tactics are created by humans and by tools, right? There's a whole breakdown and hierarchy of how that all works.
Well, and it's also it's playing again back into the human side and the
Mhm.
human component emotion of
Yep.
it. But also like from that, like a takeaway is it's like to me that also sounds like and most people probably like default to being like, oh, brand story, it's like one singular story.
Right.
But in like your description there, it's like you're not confined to one story or one solution that you're
Right.
bringing. Like if you have a variety of products, you could have probably a variety of stories or
Hmm.
different ways that you might bring that solution or the value to it. So I feel like it also opens up the possibilities more for a brand and especially at like the enterprise level.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and there's a friend of mine, a very wise creative director, once told me that there are as many brands exist as there are people that view your brand, because a brand is just the what is in the mind and the heart of the individual of how they feel about your company. So that's a brand. So like you don't even have full control over all of the brand stories that are out there or what your brand means. All you can do is try to influence that, right? So there are millions of ways to do that, and all of it rolls up. I mean, not to be hokey, but all of it rolls up to like what our good friend Simon Sinek's been yelling about. Start with why, right? Why, how, what, right? Like do the breakdown. People are probably tired of that, but it helps significantly because everything should then branch off of that. So although you might have a bunch of different brand stories, you should have one why, right? you might have multiple hows and even more whats, and the brand story will tear off of that. But like, why does your company exist? And why does your brand exist? Or why should it exist? Why should, of all the things that people can spend time and energy on, why should they spend time and energy on you? Why are you so special? And you answer those questions. I think it actually does change your outlook on all marketing and even sales, as for that matter.
Well, and also with that like question, you're hitting on like, one of the most like scarce resources being time. And
Hmm.
so it's like, why are they spending the time? Why is it worth it? It's like that hits to me like right at the core of
Yeah.
it. Now, I want to get into kind of like maybe it's like some examples of this. And I know you spend a fair amount of time in like cybersecurity, which like to me from like the SEO perspective, one, I think of like enterprise as being the
Mhm.
like, I don't know, like the top of the majors, the
Yeah.
pros,
Yeah.
like kind of because it's like you're in this new arena, you have scale to deal with, you have more stakeholders, you probably have, some really strong executive level opinions in
Hmm.
it. But then also in these certain areas of like, in Google's words, money, your money, your life, kind
Yeah.
of like queries. Cybersecurity, like that's a tough segment. Like that's one that's scrutinized from like a search engine perspective. It has the potential to impact the well-being of the user. So I think like that area in particular, and also like the complexity of the product becomes challenging. So like how do you bring this storytelling into an arena like that?
Yeah. It still is, and we get this pushback all the time. We have a technical buyer. Like, our buyer's a CTO. Are they really, like, brand storytelling really gonna work on them? And I just I always just allude to asking, like, the executives how they spend their free time. And they're all doing the same thing we're doing, which is consuming content. Everybody consumes content. Everybody consumes
Mhm.
storytelling all the time, all the time. And now maybe they have less time for like entertainment level stuff, but like they sure as heck have plenty of time dedicated to upskilling themselves as an individual in their field. So that's where that base of how you actually attract those people lives. In cybersecurity is specifically difficult because you have a lot of the, FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, which is where a lot of marketing goes in that place, is like scare people. You're vulnerable. You're going to be
Mhm.
attacked. All that kind of stuff, and it doesn't work. I mean, like, theoretically it does. Like, you can scare people into buying your products, but the second that somebody offers an alternative that's not doesn't scare them, they're gonna go, right? Like, it's not sticky at all. So we always lean into like empowering the reader. We lean into like giving them the skills to protect themselves, be a defender, be a protector. And that's the angle that we usually take with it, opposed to the opposite, which is, don't be a victim. So,
Interesting.
I think it all just comes down to understanding the target audience as much as possible, understanding kind of like, well, first, how you can make their life better, how you help them, certainly. Understand an angle that's gonna be a positive angle, that's gonna make them feel good about their life and their job and not bad about it. And then you can start to break down tactics based on where they spend their time and energy. It still all ties back to the brand story, even though it's a social post on LinkedIn that you have to, like, do a partnership thing with and push it out, doesn't mean it's not grounded in the brand story. Just That's just a tactic. LinkedIn is just the medium that it lives in. Certainly, you create the deliverable around where it's going to live and how people are going to consume it. That's really important. And I think sometimes people forget that a little bit. Maybe they go lean a little too heavy and just, this is the story. They'll get it or they won't. But like, if you know where it's going to live and how it's going to get in front of people and how they're going to consume it, break it up into something that's
Mhm.
consumable there, right? So again, it's kind of like a tree, a decision tree, right? Like, you start on the front end with the audience, then you start to break down like where they spend their time, how they consume content, what's the decision making model. And there's a lot of gatekeepers when it comes to making a cybersecurity decision. So you have to make your content and your story friendly to the people who aren't the primary decision maker, but might be the everyday user or the person who's been asked to research this thing. So, there's definitely different angles. So then you start to break out into like sub personas and things like that too. It definitely gets more complicated, but for brand storytelling, you have much more of an ability to be unique in a space like cybersecurity because there are so many people doing the same thing. There are so many people who are grounding their time and energy and their tactics in fear, or keeping things like trying to prove that they're smart. The worst thing you can do in your content is try to prove that you're smart to somebody. They don't. They're not going to get. They're not going to decide that you're smart by like you using language that you know is complex, right? Like people want things to be explained to them in easy ways. That doesn't mean that you're not smart. That just means you're not a time thief, and taking away more time than you need to from them. So anyway, in a roundabout way, that's how we approach those complex industries. Whether it's enterprise or not, just means there's like usually more people in the decision tree. So you have to like start to build tactics around all of those sub personas. But in the end, it's still brand storytelling. It's just about medium and tactics that come from it.
Well, and it's an interesting point too of like the multiple personas in that kind of buyer's journey. And like to me, immediately I was thinking like, oh, okay, obviously then there's multiple stories from it. But I feel like the way that you're presenting that is like, yes, there may be multiple stories hitting on different personas, but it kind of feels like maybe it's you have each story part of
Hmm.
continuous through line that then
Yep.
is making that connectivity between like one starting point all the way through the end.
That's important when you have multiple people and that because they're going to come together at some point in time. And that through line has to be there. You can't sell one thing to one person in the process and sell something different to somebody else. Like there's going to be no through line when they get together and talk about it. It's going to be incongruent. It's going to seem like you don't know what you're talking about, or
Mhm.
you're just trying to sell them whatever they're willing to buy, which is never going to be good. So yeah, that's very important.
Well, and part of that too. So it's like to me, some of these elements is it's all like hitting on also like trust
Yeah.
components because it's like whether it's consistency when the people come together or if it's in the point that you made previously of like yeah using big words is make you sound smart. It's more of like the value that you're bringing in that
Mhm.
perspective. Like how does trust then like is that the kind of like ultimate driver that brings the value of the storytelling? Like how does trust fit into this?
Yeah, trust is everything, right? And this is actually playing out in our space on the SEO front here today, right? Like we're seeing less and less, traffic to websites, and a lot of it has to do with like the trust in the buying cycle. I think, which is happening. Like people are literally turning to people they trust and saying, "Hey, what products do you use for this?" And then they're validating, opposed to like
Mhm.
searching to find options. At least that's what we've come up against, especially in big industries like cybersecurity. Um, Trust with your target audience is what brand is, right? Like that's the definition of brand. Certainly brand loyalty is trust being built over time. And you do that by doing what you say you're going to do over time. That's trust 100%. Easy to break though, because all you have to do is do the opposite. Take from somebody without giving in return. Pretty easy to do for brands. They do it all the time. We break trust by, forcing people to go through gates like form fill to get content that's not as valuable as the contact information I just gave them. We break that down when we get these unsolicited messages from people who because we registered for an event, stuff like that. That
Mhm.
ruins trust. You just ruined a ton of trust there by doing those tactics, right? And then you can just build it over time by giving, like give freely of yourself, give freely, give away some of your secret sauce. Like instead of just telling people what something is, informational content, let's say. And by the way, informational content is getting gobbled up by AI and AIO, and like people are getting their answers, quick answers all over the place. They're not usually coming to your website for that. They and then sub in some more educational content. Teach people how to solve their own problems, solve a problem for themselves, so they can walk away and say, "Oh my gosh, I know how to solve this now." Educate them, truly educate them, and that builds that trust over time. And I know some people are not comfortable with that; they're not comfortable giving away the secret sauce. But it's been at least my experience, and maybe people have had different experiences. But people don't buy services from us because they don't know how to do it or can't do it. They buy services from us because they believe they have confidence that it'll get done at the highest possible quality, at the best possible time, right? So they don't have to worry about it. That's why they buy. Anybody can write, everybody can write, anybody can put pen to paper for the most part. If you want it to be good and you want it done on time, that's why you hire an expert, right? So anyway, telling people like how to do some things or what to do, I don't think is as damaging as many people think, and I think it's a great way to build trust.
Well, now, like with that, I feel like it kind of brings us back like full circle. So it's like, tell us a little bit about like the work that you're doing. Like, how are you enabling and empowering these enterprise businesses to do this at scale?
Yeah, and this is really the core concept around the tool that we just launched, which is called Chatter. It's essentially like content ideation and aggregation, but in the end, the idea is, the type of content you should be producing, the way you should be like delivering your brand story should be aligned with what the audience needs right now, your target audience needs right
Mm,
now, and what better to know what that is rather than what they're saying and reading right now. So this concept of this is a way we've always done content generation at content for 13 years. We've been creating content this way. So we're like, well, why don't we build that process into some sort of application so other people can do it too? We research topics that are relevant to our target audience. Like right now, what stories are being published literally right now that are relevant based on keyword, syntax, the audience themselves, the solutions we provide. What's that Venn diagram? What's like right in the center of that? And this tool that we developed essentially like pulls all that content into a feed and shows you all the stories based off of relevancy that are important right now and lets you start the ideation process of saying, okay, well, this is relevant to my audience. If I were to create a content topic that's based on kind of this vein, what would it look like for my brand? And kind of help move that process along a
mm.
little bit. It's the first part. Content ideation is the first part of getting that brand story out there, right? And in the past, we focused a little more heavily on keywords being a driver for that. Still important, still vitally important, but honestly, getting like the keywords into the topic in the relevant places, doing the back end SEO stuff, doing the schema markup, the AEO stuff, so it's like shown in both places really well. That's like table stakes, right? Now it's not particularly easy to do, but like everybody should be doing that with every piece. That doesn't mean the whole piece needs to be derived around that direction. It just needs to be incorporated in an authentic and organic way. So that's actually our tool allows for that too, because that's how we do things again here, where all we're doing is the same thing that we do, which is come up with a topic that's relevant and interesting to the target audience today. Infuse the elements that make sense that we're an expert on, infuse the keywords that we need to in the right places, build and branch off of that, have sources of information that they would recognize and know and have read recently, and develop like the story around that. It's a great starting point. So, and that builds trust too. If you're an audience member and the brand that you follow is producing content that just an hour ago you read or saw was like broken on whatever source might be out there, that's pretty impressive to an individual, and that definitely
Mm.
builds this trust factor of like there's someone I can go to get an honest take on what's happening right now. So anyway, that's the idea. Again, the way content has always been created, we can just do it a lot faster now with these tools.
Well, and I feel like that does position well into like, I don't know, the stage or like where we are in search, because especially with like a lot of these like generative LLM driven
Mhm,
experiences, there is a recency bias in that
mhm.
too. So it's like you're hitting both, some of what these systems like,
Yeah.
but then it's also you're hitting on still that like kind of human and value side. And what's been interesting for me is like, yes, there's always changes of like how we're doing work. Yes, there's always changes of like where we're competing.
Mhm.
But in some ways, it feels like our practice is becoming more and more like the pendulum swinging back to like more
Yes.
traditional like PR and like consumer behavior elements, not just like the technical aspect. And we're not losing those, but it's like I feel like we are swinging back into some of those like more like core marketing principles and like human behavior elements beyond just the like standard SEO
Mhm.
tactic level items.
Yeah, 100%. We have that conversation every day here, Tyson. Like every day we that comes up in conversation here, but I think you're 100% correct.
Well, let's jump into the lightning round. So I'm gonna throw five different kind of shorter form questions at you. And the first one, what's one content marketing tactic that still works as well today as it did 10 years ago?
Well, it's been the entire topic of this conversation, but storytelling, and it always will. Storytelling is how the world has always changed and always will change. So it's never going to go away.
Yeah, and I feel like just there's so much power behind that because again, you're coming back to the human emotional area. And if
Yep.
you're just reading like bullet points, it's just surface level and it's like it's not inflicting an emotion, an experience, like something that's really going to drive you into action.
Yeah, that's right.
Next question, what's one marketing metric people pay too much attention to nowadays?
Sales qualified leads. And that might give me a little bit
Okay.
of trouble, but I think we need to start measuring the trust factor more than like what we've taken from people. And to me, a lead is contact information, qualification, and that's what we've asked of people, and not what we've given to them. So it's not really a trust metric. It's simply like a uh, again what we've taken versus what we've given metric.
Yeah. And I'm right there with you. And it's like, I mean, I almost was kind of immediately going towards like, yeah, traffic's one, or like maybe like average keyword position
Yep.
and like those kind of like traditional pieces. But for me too, it's like the more and more of how I'm looking at this is like I'm looking at these like KPIs more like cards in your hand,
Hmm.
where it's like each one is building a different piece of the story. And then even in that enterprise arena, it's like you're needing to play those cards at different points. And if you're only left with like one KPI that you're gonna lay like that's the hill that I die on, it's just like you have a one play for any type of situation. So it just feels so limiting,
Yeah.
especially at the enterprise level when now you're managing stakeholders and like all these like nuances that are going to depict whether or not you're successful in actually implementing your strategy.
Yeah, and that swing of that pendulum, right, is gonna take away people aren't making less money. They are just seeing less metrics that are driving what they used to measure to make the money. So, things are happening in the dark web, like, untrackable anyway. So stop relying primarily on this metric that can only be measured if people go through the traditional path when we know they're not going through that path anyway, right?
Yeah. And there's some irony in there too, because I feel like for so many years, like us as SEOs, we've been like trying to get people to like care and think about like search visibility and
Right.
rankings and things like that. And it's like, well, now we're kind of in this world that it's like, hey, that doesn't really matter as
Yeah,
much as it
it's
used to
so
anymore.
weird, right? It's like, "Show me how this is making me money." It's like, "Well, I can show you correlation opposed to causation." And now it's like, "Oh, this is no longer giving us the metric that we didn't care about before, so, let's stop doing it." It's like, "Are you serious right now?" Like, this is kind of insane. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. What's one thing every brand needs to develop a stronger point of view on?
I think they have to have a strong point of view on specifically what they'll let happen, what they won't let happen. Right? I think we need to hear from people and brands specifically, what they'll tolerate and not, what kind of decisions they're going to make, whether they're going to make purely efficiency or money based decisions, or they're going to make decisions that are aligned with people and the values of the company. And we're seeing that play out right now. You report that you've fired a bunch of people because of quote unquote AI efficiency, your stock goes up. If you are AI efficient, you would turn those people into superheroes and you would be able to service twice as many customers. So the act of firing them is the opposite. It's proving the opposite, right? It's greed over values and people. So anyway, I guess that's a little more metaphysical than it is about marketing and content, but it does speak volumes to your potential customers.
Well, and it's also it's just kind of like short-term gains
Yep.
versus long-term success.
Yep.
And I've been saying the same thing to a lot of companies out there. It's like 100% you have to be working differently nowadays.
Hmm.
But with that, it doesn't mean necessarily like you're doing the same with less. It's like, well, now each person in your organization as a whole should be doing more.
Right.
And to me, like that's going to be one of the biggest challenges for companies is with that, you should also be moving quicker and faster.
Hmm.
And so how do you adapt to the pace of change and the pace of development rather than being like, oh, where can I make the savings and then yeah, like kind of
Yeah.
the short tricks versus the long term.
100% agree.
What's the biggest mistake brands make when using AI for content creation?
Not having a process. The
Mhm.
magic button is the biggest mistake. If you take the human creativity out of the process and just put it into a do this for me, you're going to end up with the same stuff that you don't read today. And if you're not willing to read it, by the way, if you're publishing stuff and not reading it, then why would you expect anybody else to? Like that should be the major sign of doing it wrong.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. Last question we have here is will storytelling become more important or less important in the next 5 years?
I sure hope more important, right? It has been very important up to now, and I do believe it'll become more important. My wife is a big listener of Diary of a CEO, and they had if they're listening, and they want me as a guest, or they're welcome to call me anytime. But they had somebody on. I can't remember who it was, but he said that the two skills that everybody in college needs to learn right now is not like AI engineering, it's not math or science, it is storytelling and how to build relationships with people. It doesn't matter what
Mm.
you go into, what field you're in, or what you do. As long as you can master those two things, you're going to be successful. So, yes, I do believe storytelling is going to be more important.
I agree with you. It's like the storytelling is always going to have an intrinsic value. It's like how we're doing things, the world we're living in is changing, but it's like humans aren't necessarily changing. So there
Right.
is still that human characteristic of like, well, who you're trying to convince and who you're ultimately reaching is still going to have that same emotional piece to it. And I like the two pieces, that you brought into that. And I think like for me, like one of the ones that I've been saying to people is like critical thinking
Hmm.
is it's like how to use these tools and these systems will get easier and easier and easier. But it's like the element, and I think like one of the most important things that at least that I would tell people too, and I agree with here too, but is also like someone learning how to think and think
Yeah.
critically is like such a valuable piece because that's something then that can be applied to every single type of
Hmm.
situation and how and why we are doing things.
100%. We talk about discernment around here, and AI cannot do it. But essentially, AI cannot decide if this is good or not. They can only tell you if you're happy with it or not. So you need to have that critical thinking to decide, is the output good? What does quality look like? What am I willing to put my name on at the end of the day?
Absolutely. All right, so that's going to wrap up this episode of the Voice of Search podcast. Thanks again to David J. Ebner, president and founder at Content Workshop and Chatter AI. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like to contact David, you can find a link to his LinkedIn profile in our show notes, or also you can visit his company's website at chatteragent.ai. If you haven't subscribed yet and you want a daily stream of SEO and content marketing knowledge in your podcast feed, hit that subscribe button in your podcast app or on YouTube, and we'll be back in your feed in the following day. That's all for today. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks, Tyson.